Nalin Kohli, thanks for joining me on UpFront. India is in the midst of elections, and your party, the BJP, has been in power since 2014 with Narendra Modi as your country's prime minister. But given your term in office has been marked by a nearly 30% rise in communal violence, according to your own government's Home Ministry figures, why should the people of India, especially people from minority communities, re-elect the BJP?
There are two reasons that you would see increase in statistics, and I speak also as an advocate, is that we also encourage greater reporting. For example, sometimes it's said that rapes in India have increased. Simultaneously, you also have reporting, which means encouraging victims to come out and go and report. So that's one part to it. So statistics don't always give you the complete picture. So if you would ask me, as a government, why should minorities, or as a matter of fact, why should any Indian citizen look at voting the BJP back to power, and Prime Minister Modi specifically? So my counter question is that show me a single deed of Prime Minister Modi's government that distinguishes between a Hindu, a Muslim, a Christian, a Buddhist, a Jew, or a Parsi, or any other religion that is in India. In any way, show us a scheme that is discriminatory in any sense, violates the constitutional principle of equality before law. So therefore, I don't see it.
Okay.
So basically, charges are made on us, but I don't think our agenda and our work ever shows that.
Well, we'll come on to inequality and discrimination in a moment. Just on the attacks. So when the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, warns of increasing harassment and targeting of minorities, in particular Muslims and Dalits, she's just a victim of misreporting, in your view?
Well, actually, I personally reject it. I don't hold them in very high regard personally, because I think if they would like to travel a little beyond the confines of their offices, I think they'll have enough work to do in the world that we live in. India is certainly not the place that they need to be focusing on.
Well, Indians are focused on what's going on in India. According to a study by India's NDTV network, since your government came to office, the use of hateful and divisive language by top politicians in India has shot up by nearly 500%, they say. Your party's president, for example, Amit Shah, recently referred to undocumented Muslim immigrants from Bangladesh as, quote, termites and infiltrators. Are you okay with that kind of basically Nazi-like dehumanizing language? It's the kind of language that's preceded ethnic cleansing and genocide in countries across the world. Infiltrators, termites?
Well, you've used multiple questions into one, so let's try and address each one of them. So let's basically look at the analogy of a termite. A termite, essentially, and in India we're used to it because we do have a lot of termites, they come from the ground and they eat you up hollow from inside. And therefore, in India, if you would travel and ask people who live in the northeast of India, which has been inundated by millions of illegal immigrants, we have districts in the state of Assam that no longer have Indian citizens. And when I say Indian citizens, we are including Indian Muslims too, who were originally
just
part
on the
of
language,
Assam,
you're saying it's fine to call
with,
people termites and infiltrators. That's not dehumanizing language.
No, I think it's an analogy, and it's a perfectly apt analogy. Because we make four cases when we raise these issues of illegal immigrants. A, we point out that they are a security risk because we've had, in terms of Rohingyas, reports coming of links to terrorist networks, and we have been victims of terrorism for almost 3 decades, particularly from Pakistan. The second part is in terms of draining resources meant for Indian citizens. Indian citizens are including Muslim citizens. And if you are going to have people who are not natural citizens of yours coming in there, and let's look at it. Immigration is a problem that many countries in the West also, in whether it's Europe, whether it's the United States.
But hold on, I've got to jump in there. It's not
they may
just
use
about,
a different terminology.
It's not just, and Donald Trump has been criticized for racist language, so not the best analogy maybe. How about the BJP government minister, Union Minister Anant Kumar Hegde, who has said, and I quote, as long as there is Islam in the world, there will be terrorism. Until we uproot Islam, we can't remove terrorism. You're okay with that rhetoric? You're okay with him being in government representing the BJP?
Well, number one, I'm in my position to basically say that every individual has a right to articulate their point of view.
Agreed.
He spoke in his individual capacity.
We agree
So
on
he
that.
spoke in his individual capacity. And he has not spoken that in terms of a government policy. Two, you ask me my view, I think I respect every religion. And as far as I see it, I'm concerned about violence in the world, but then I have the greatest respect for Islam as much as I'd have for any other religion.
Which is good to hear. So as someone who respects Islam and Indian Muslims, how do you feel about a BJP minister saying, until we uproot Islam, we can't remove terrorism? If he had said, until we uproot Hinduism, would you be okay with that? We wouldn't be okay with that. Why are you okay with this? Why is he allowed to stay in his job? So why isn't he fired?
Well, I'll give you an answer straight on that. Is that if we start looking at it only from the perspective of what BJP says it, then I'd say that you'd first have to do it. If you want to make a case against the BJP, you'll have to look at the performance of every government and the statements and wild statements and crazy statements coming from a lot of people from 1947.
As a lawyer, you know there's a word
so therefore,
as
far as I'm concerned,
Nalin Kohli, you're telling me you're giving straight answers. But this is whataboutism. No. You're saying, what about Congress? What about other people? I'll ask them when they come on my show. I've interviewed Shashi Thoroor on this show. Happy to ask him all those questions. I'm asking you on behalf of the BJP. You have a minister in government who says, I repeat, until we uproot Islam, we can't remove terrorism. How does he stay in his job after making such an outrageous claim?
Well, I think there are three parts to it. So if you ask me, I'll say it also frankly. A, if we look at the global terrorist map, there is the misuse of Islam by a large number of people. And I know that Muslims and Muslim countries are concerned about it too. No, 1 minute, hang on.
That's not what he said, with respect.
No, you'll have to hear this because it's uncomfortable. So let's talk the uncomfortable.
It's not uncomfortable. We've devoted entire shows to ISIS and to Muslim terrorism.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I'm asking about somebody who said that until we uproot Islam from the world, you're okay with that?
So let me just, no, 1 minute. You're trying to get an answer from me without letting me complete it. So I will give it.
This is the fourth time I've asked the question with respect, but okay. Go on.
Has he spoken after perhaps an Islamist terrorists coming and blowing up a few individuals? We face hundreds and thousands of people who have suffered from terrorism. So that context, it may be more in that context. He may be giving a point of view which may not be what you and I may use the same kind of language, but he's entitled to, under the Constitution, to have a point of view.
He has a point of view. Interestingly, you mentioned kind of Islamist terrorism, and clearly Muslims are involved in terrorism around the world. Christians have been involved in terrorism. Jews have been involved in terrorism. And yet your Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, said last month that, quote, nowhere in history have any Hindus been involved in terrorism. That's a ridiculous statement to make, isn't it? Of course they have.
Well, in the vast majority, if you look at it in terms of a population ratio.
We didn't say vast majority.
No, but I'm giving a straight answer.
No, you're not giving a straight answer. You literally jumped away and said vast majority. He said nowhere in history. I'm quoting your Prime Minister. Nowhere in history have Hindus been involved in terrorism. That's not true. We can both agree on that, right?
Well, at least I've not heard of anybody using Hinduism as a religion as a basis to justify.
So the most famous, probably terrorist in Indian history who murdered Mahatma Gandhi, the right-wing Hindu nationalist Nathuram Godse, member of the RSS, the volunteer group that Mr. Modi is also a member of. He's not a Hindu terrorist in your view? He's not a Hindu who committed an act of terrorism?
No. Well, I mean, I don't know. Then perhaps you are looking at every murder to be terrorism. That's a new definition.
No, I think the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi was an act of terror. I think that's fair to say.
It's a murder.
Okay.
It's as simple that you're defining it as terror.
Okay.
I'm looking at it as this. So let's go one by one. How do we define terror? In fact, this is an interesting
Clearly, you define terror as something that only Muslims, Christians, and Jews do.
My understanding of terrorism is when an individual, in any capacity, individually or backed up by a group, in any basis, picks up and goes out and kills more than a single individual human being by a bomb, blowing themselves up, picking up a gun, and that's also an act of terror in that sense, because it's terrorizing more than a single human being.
Well, that's not the definition of terrorism that the UN uses, or the US or the EU. It's not about numbers of people dead. It's about the political objectives. But even if you take your definition of multiple people in 2002,
then let's take your
objective. Well, okay, in 2002, let's take your definition.
Hang on, hang on.
No, I need to ask a question, then you answer. In 2002, in Gujarat, hundreds of people were killed by Hindu nationalist terrorists, were they not? That was hundreds of people killed by Hindu nationalists.
I will disagree with you completely. Because you see, on the Gujarat things, I worked on that too. So while everybody looks at the best bakery or looks at the Muslims who got killed, why don't we also talk about the Hindus who went out and saved the Muslims? Why don't we talk of the Gujarat police that went into the Nurani Masjid and ensured?
That's like saying ISIS is not a terrorist group because Iraqi police fight them. That's a weird analogy. You know that. I'm talking about the people who killed people in Gujarat. Were they not terrorists? Yes or no?
Have you finished? So let me put it like this. Number one, you are looking somewhere to make an interesting headline that terrorism is defined in a new way when it comes to look at it at the BJP and India. I'm going to reject that outright. As a political person and as an advocate, I can now count you out all the riots in India, which is the gory part of India's history, starting from 1947 right up to
no one's disputing that. No. I'm not.
So therefore, hold on.
There's no things I don't disagree with you.
So the Sikh genocide.
Hang on.
Hang on. What about the Sikh genocide of '84?
Again, you're doing whataboutism. You're literally saying what about? I'm not questioning that. I'm not questioning.
So
in fact, I began.
So how are they terrorism? Let's stop at this.
I began by saying Muslims, Jews, Christians, Sikhs all carry out acts of terror. You're the only one saying Hindus are a special group.
No, you're trying to give every act of violence. No, and I disagree with you, and I will continue to disagree. Because you're looking at defining every act of violence as terrorism. Okay. And I'm making a qualified
Well, let's take a specific case, because we're running out of time. Let's take a specific case. Right now, the BJP has nominated for parliament a radical Hindu nationalist named Pragya Singh Thakur, who is currently on bail facing terror charges under your Indian legal system for her alleged involvement in a 2008 bomb attack that killed 6 people. Can you point to a governing party anywhere in the democratic world which nominates candidates for office who are on trial for terrorism?
Well, you should have come and attended her hearing in the Honorable Supreme Court, where within that hearing also, in so many years of investigation under different regimes of government, and I'm talking primarily of our opposition party, the Congress party, which framed her, went in and couldn't find an iota of evidence against her. You can't incarcerate a person just because you believe that she may have committed an act of terror.
Sorry, I'm confused.
It's as simple as that. She's out on bail.
Maybe I'm mistaken. She's not on trial for terrorism.
No, she is. I'm saying that.
And you're okay with someone who's on trial for terrorism standing in Parliament?
No.
She hasn't been cleared yet. Maybe you're
also
right. Maybe she was framed. But right now, she's currently on trial for terrorism, and she's running as a candidate for your party.
And my answer to that is exactly what I said a moment ago. The Supreme Court is where, finally, she got her bail. On the basic grounds, go read the judgment. Don't ask me. Read the judgment and tell your viewers.
So hold on. They threw out the case and she's innocent. Is that what you're saying?
I never said that.
Well, then you're diverting us from the central point.
I'm simply saying that there is not an iota of evidence. The trial will eventually, as it's happened with another person in the similar case.
So we agree. She's on trial. You believe she's innocent, but right now she is on trial for terrorism. Nalin Kohli, one final question. Given we've seen this increase in communal violence, the cow vigilante killings, which we didn't have time to discuss, the anti-Muslim rhetoric, which we did discuss, your government's even been accused of rewriting history books to take out the achievements of Muslim rulers. There's a lot of talk about Hindu nationalism right now on your watch. Is it fair to say that the ultimate goal of a BJP government in the long run is to turn India into a Hindu Rashtra, a Hindu state? Is that the ultimate goal?
Constitutionally, India is a country where every religion is given equal rights. All Indian citizens, we are first Indian citizens, then we are Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, or whatever thing. That's how it is. The Muslims who stayed back in 1947 chose to make India their land, and then through the constitution got rights for themselves as Muslims or Christians or whatever.
And so that's not something you support? You don't support a Hindu Rashtra?
I mean, let me say it bluntly. Muslims are as much citizens of India as Hindus are. So are Christians, so are Buddhists. So there is no denial of the fact that we are all Indian citizens first.
You say,
and the constitution gives us that right.
But you still don't answer the question. Do you support a Hindu state, building a Hindu state? Yes or no?
We are a country that is not theologically run. We are a country that runs on the constitution. That's your answer. Pick up the constitution, and the constitution doesn't speak of a Hindu or a Muslim state. Pakistan runs on Islam. India runs on the constitution. But members of the BJP do talk about a Hindu state, so I'm just wondering, do you, Nalin Kohli, support that call for a Hindu state? Well, that's a 30-minute debate to understand in what context it's used, not to convert India into a theologically driven Hindu state.
Unfortunately, we don't have another 30 minutes, so Nalin Kohli, thank you for taking time out. Appreciate you joining me on UpFront.
Thank you.